We've got another panel for you now, and the topic of discussion is progressive web apps, PWAs. Leading the conversation will be Paul Skelden. He's editor at Internet Retailing, the leading online news source for the retail industry. He's also a research analyst at RetailX, and he specialises in mobile, marketplaces, and media. Offering their thoughts are a trio of PWA experts. We have Erway, Group Product Manager for Adobe Commerce at Adobe. He's a product and user experience leader with over 20 years of experience at startups and enterprise companies. Joining him is Penny McLachlan, Product Manager for Google Chrome at Google. She's an advocate for the open, awesome web and specialises in PWA and web permissions. And finally, Jamie Huskin, the Meet Magento UK organiser and CEO here at JH. He brings real-world experience of delivering PWAs for B2B and B2B clients across a range of verticals, including clothing, homeware, DIY, and much, much more. I'll hand it over now to Paul to take us through the panel.
Great, Joseph, thank you very much. And hello, Eric, Penny, and Jamie. Hope you're all doing well today. Last session of the day, as Joseph says, but a really interesting one. As most of you know out there watching, mobile, can't really escape it. It really is driving e-commerce. And there are many different ways of doing it, many challenges around doing it as well. But one of the things you've probably heard about or read about a lot, or hopefully if you've downloaded the ebook that I recently published with the help of Adobe and JH about progressive web apps, you're probably wondering what they are and how they can impact your business and help you going forward. We've got the people who really know everything there is to know about them. So this is your opportunity to find out everything you need to know and to ask the questions that are burning in your mind about progressive web apps and how to implement them in your business. So I guess that's where we really need to start is what are progressive web apps, PWAs? Can we define them? I'll throw that to you first of all, Penny, because, well, you're from Google. You know everything.
Definitely do not know everything, but thank you so much for the question. Started with a progressive web app is really a pattern for building a modern web experience, something that looks and feels like it belongs on the device that it's running on. So on the smartphone, that means that it's going to work offline, or at least provide some minimal offline experience, that it could be installable because many users on smartphones are really more familiar with the app model of accessing content. So to make that web property installable means that it can be launched from a launching surface on the device, like the home screen. It shows up in the activity switcher. These kinds of properties of a digital experience that look and feel app-like, essentially. Now, I call it a pattern for building a modern application because there's no one single technology to building a progressive web app. So there is a surface worker in a progressive web app, and we could get probably a little later in the conversation to what that means exactly. But although there are technologies that go into the building of it, what a progressive web app is actually all about is the experience. What is the user getting at the end of the day?
Sorry, I had to mute myself. That someone nearby has decided now is the perfect time to do drilling. So I do apologise to everyone for any strange noises you can hear in the background. We've had a beautiful and quiet day here in the countryside until now. Yes, I think that is really the crux of it, isn't it, Penny? That it's not just one single technology. It's more of a sort of concept. So Eric, what are your sort of more sort of practical views of what defines a progressive web app?
Yeah, so I mean, we've been working with Penny and the Google team, really in this journey that we started a couple of years ago with James Utland and team. And for us, it's really been about experience. And so we have a series of product enhancements to the Magento and Adobe Commerce platform that really look at this from a variety of perspectives. Whether you're a merchant, whether you're a partner or developer, we're solving the needs across the board. As a merchant, you really care about conversion. So we're solving for the conversion drop that happens very often between web and native devices. And so especially with the rise in mobile and the data that we continue to see from Adobe and other sources, we've got to get those experiences right. It's really the hallmark of what we do, and it's really been our mission from day one. On the flip side of this, we've got the partner, the developer experiences. And so this idea of flexibility, and one of the things that Elena talked about in her PWA talk earlier today at Meet Magento UK was being able to kind of start small and then take it from there. And so what we really like about this is that flexibility where it doesn't necessarily need to be an all or nothing proposition, but really bringing to life a lot of the key constructs that Penny has described, and really just putting together great, dynamic, superior shopping experiences. That's what it's been all about. And that's really been kind of our journey over the past couple of years, again, working with folks like Google, but also with JH on some of our very first launches to date.
Yeah, I was going to bring in Jamie there as to sort of what the JH perspective on this is, because you're very much at the sort of coal face of implementation of these things.
Absolutely. I think for me is, we've all said user experience several times. I think it's that thing where to get the true user experience, you have to live on the mobile device, right? It's to say this shouldn't just act like a website that's the same everywhere. It's about how do we make it feel like it's a mobile interaction? How do we feel like you're on the device in the first place? And the series of different capabilities that we have there, it's about just picking and choosing the right ones at the right time in order to enhance that experience to live there. So 70, 80, 90% of your traffic is on mobile. This is where you're at from a thinking perspective when it comes to nailing that user experience and really just integrating with what's in the user's hands, as opposed to what can feel after being in the PWA world for a while like plain text websites and just things that just don't work as you think they should.
Absolutely. I don't think we can say user experience enough, because I think it's really the crux of what drives getting people to interact with your brand if you're a retailer. So that's what PWAs are in sort of a technical sort of way. Why should merchants, retailers be interested in them? What do they bring to retail specifically, Penny?
So I agree completely. We really can't say the words user experience enough here. That users generally don't care about the technology that was used to generate the experience. They care about what is it actually like to interact with this thing. So what progressive web apps bring to the table is a more performant experience for starters. So if you're building for offline first, you're also going to be making something that's very fast as a really important side effect of that, because you're probably going to be checking a local cache on the device before reaching out to the network and validating that that's something that's still fresh. What that means is that for a well-designed progressive web app, page loads could be nearly instant. You could be doing things like prefetching content ahead of when it's needed, so that when a user interacts with a product on a product list page, they're going to get that product detail page almost instantly. So speed is an important aspect of progressive web app. Also, just the layout and design of a modern progressive web app ought to be something that is going to look and feel like something that belongs on the mobile phone, and it shouldn't be simply everything that's in a desktop layout put into a really long page that the user's going to have to scroll through page after page after page. So there's a lot of really important characteristics both from a user experience perspective as well as from the technology. A lot of people underestimate just how intermittent mobile signals are, especially in urban environments where we have buildings. People could be underground, they could be above ground. They may not be out of signal for hours at a time, and that's not really the case that we're designing for. The case that we're interested in is this person walked into a tube station, for example, and suddenly their connection is either very poor or perhaps they don't have one at all. But you'd like them to finish that shopping journey. And if you're not offering them something, if you don't have that offline first experience, then that might be a missed opportunity with that particular person.
Excellent stuff. Yeah, absolutely. And Eric, from your sort of point of view, Adobe, what do merchants do you see gaining from deploying progressive web apps? Why should they be talking to you?
No, I think Penny covered a lot of the really good cases around the experience itself. Really, again, it's really about conversion, really having a seamless, resilient experience along the way. Performance is very important, but it's just one of many aspects of that. And so what we also want to do is really look at the key capabilities that we're unlocking with PWA. And so when you start to think about things like push notifications for Android devices, when you start thinking about even distribution, right? This idea of distribution with PWAs, you can now package PWAs into the Google Play Store. You can do those in the Windows Store as well. And you can really start to think about what it means to distribute and really reach your audiences as well. And so when you look at the overall benefits of this from a sheer merchant and business perspective, it's well more than just a set of technology. I think that gets you there. And to be honest, I think we're only just scratching the surface on the full potential that we're seeing here, even in the journey that we've had to date. But it really solves a lot of these, and we saw this quite a bit, 10 plus years ago with responsive, and it fell short with some of the capabilities we didn't have then that are now and have been baked into devices, both desktop and mobile, over the past 5 or so years. So it's a pretty exciting time to be part of this. Again, and when I think about that, and I also think about the flexibility and agility, where traditional commerce platforms, you really have manage basically full stack deployments. You really have to think about planning those front end and back end together. With the benefit of a headless approach like PWA, you can make changes at point of need, and that becomes a very powerful proposition in terms of making any changes that you might need as a business in a time where business is fast and the changes are needed, and sometimes you want to do those in days versus weeks. And so we're pretty excited about the potential, but again, I think we're only starting to scratch the surface based on what we've seen.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Jamie, what do your sort of retail clients get from PWAs from your perspective?
I think an alternative take to the two so far is essentially what we're trying to do here for quite a lot of retailers is avoid them having to build a mobile app earlier than necessary. The mobile apps are extremely, a dedicated mobile app going into a store, etc., is extremely important to the power users of that brand in terms of the really hardcore loyal customer base. But what we want to do is offer those features to absolutely everybody that interacts with the brands, everybody that can go on the website, and anybody that makes a purchase. And offering as many of those as possible is the core goal here. It's not to say you don't need the app necessarily, but it's to say that we want to bring as much of that forward in the roadmap so that we don't feel like there's a barrier between website and that level of interactivity. So Penny, when she's talking about local storage there, it's just a phenomenal example. I expect if I'm using an app when I'm on page 2 and I click page 1, I don't need to go to the server to get it again. I just asked for it. It's the same for a PWA. I'm not going to go to the server. I'm going to see it straight away. And therefore, as a user, I'm not waiting around. I have this kind of psychological itch that's kind of being scratched to say that I'm getting it as soon as I want it, and therefore I'm happier and I'm happier and I'm happier. And from our perspective, when we work with retailers, what we're trying to do is build in that psychological advantage when they go back to the competitor and it's slow and it's taking a couple of seconds to get back to page 1 that they were just on, that they start thinking to themselves, I should probably go back to that site I was at earlier and the competitor I started with. And it's just building that huge advantage. So for our clients, it's often saying you're going to go get 2 steps ahead of the rest of the competitors. But then also the customers slowly are going to start thinking more about you too, because of those subtle details that add up across that entire experience. That's how I really look at it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the more consumers get used to mobile commerce, particularly some brands having an app, they're going to want that experience or a similar experience from other retailers. And this is, as you say, a way of getting that without necessarily going straight to app development, which is obviously not always affordable for all players straight away. So clearly they have huge advantages. I guess from a practical point of view, which is the thing that's always sort of intrigued me really about it, is how do you implement them? I mean, what do I need to do as a retailer? I've got my e-commerce system set up. I'm thinking, wow, I really need to go mobile. This sounds like a way of getting there and getting this app-like experience. What do I do, Jamie?
Well, I mean, there's a risk of it being overcomplicated for a lot, right? A lot of people that I speak to, it's I've got to destroy everything and start again, right? Like that's a lot of money. It's going to take a long while to get there, and I think it's start by busting that myth, I suppose. I think there's 3 routes really, from kind of small to large, I suppose. Small is that you pick key parts of the user experience and you enhance them. You just target those little things, and they'll build up over time. Second way to do it is to pick sections of the site. So let's say the checkout or your search functionality as the search results, etc., and make them PWA, and slowly over time kind of for lack of a better term, convert or migrate that site to a full progressive web app across the board. The third way, is to scrap and start again. But I would say that third way is typically coinciding with a total redesign, a total rethink of the user experience. It's coinciding with the migration of platform or similar, like a big event that it just makes sense to do rather than a cost by itself. If that makes sense. It's usually, I want a wholesale leap forward at the same time, but increasingly, certainly over the last 18 months or so, retailers are looking for how do we get there faster without having to stop for a period of time. So they want to chip away at that and get there over time.
Yeah, excellent. So an iterative approach is the ideal way to do it. Eric, is that something you agree with at Adobe?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really the right way to think about it. And I think one of the nice things about with what we're doing is that we've consciously taken a headless approach, and by doing so, if you have, for example, a Magento or Adobe Commerce backend, you're just working on the front end of what, and yet while that represents a redesign, it doesn't represent necessarily a full migration, right? And so depending on where you started from, there are a lot of different paths, much of which Jamie described, for you to really get the results that you want. And very often the question is, what is the cost of not doing that, right? And so while any implementation does have inherent cost associated with it, you've got to think about what that means to miss out. I mean, the conversion we continue to see is strong, the performance is strong, the experiences have really been impressive across the way. And so it's just a consideration for really any business to move forward. But there are ways to do it. Like Jamie described, there's ways to do A/B testing, to maybe set up a very small test or a pop-up store or a region or what have you, in a way to, I guess, if you really want to de-risk or really understand this, there's a lot of ways to do it. And that's the flexibility of the approach in general.
Right, great. And Penny, what would be the Google perspective on advising people about implementation?
I think what I would share is one of the riskiest things that you can do in technology is an immediate cutover from one system to another. It's just very difficult to predict what is the outcome under load going to be of something brand new, which is why the iterative approach, if it's possible, would be something that you should look at quite carefully as a way of moving towards PWA. This is especially true when it comes to e-commerce front ends. This is because, as great as the new front end might be, if you are doing a cutover from an old front end to a new front end, you're basically moving from something that you've probably put a lot of time into optimization on to something that, as great as it might be as a starting point, is actually unoptimized because it just hasn't been battle tested by your users yet. And so that cutover is going to be a moment of extreme anxiety for the team. It's going to be quite difficult. So if it's possible to start with parts of that journey, and just do that cut over one piece at a time, whether that's ideally through A/B testing, to ensure that as you move forward, you're actually starting to learn lessons and integrate the feedback that you're getting from your users, either directly or from your analytics, into the experience as you migrate from an old front end to a new front end. That's going to help you out a lot. Another misconception that I often see is the confusion between a single page app and a progressive web app. So many progressive web apps are single page apps, but they're not necessarily one and the same. And you can make a multi-page app load so quickly that it's effectively the same as a single page app experience. So that's another misconception I see. A lot of teams are thinking, we're going to have to actually do this hard cutover. We have to build a whole new front end because we want to move to an SPA architecture. That's not necessarily the case.
Okay, no, interesting. So that's sort of how the advantages they bring and how to begin to think about implementing them. Once you have a progressive web app in place, how does it sort of affect sort of discoverability and all those sorts of things? We've talked about the user experience and how it improves that, but how does it help in people actually finding you? Penny?
So certainly, if you're taking advantage of the installable capabilities of the PWA, it's going to help a lot with the re-engagement side of things, because you do have that presence on the home screen or in the user's applications tray, so that it's much easier for them to come back to the app. With respect to how it helps for discoverability, one way that it can help there is because you are going to tend to focus on speed, and speed is one of the signals that search considers valuable in terms of the experience, and it does affect ranking. So that emphasis on speed is also going to affect your discoverability. In terms of directly, there's no technology inside of a PWA specifically around discoverability. It's all just sort of the knock-on effects of having a better overall experience.
Okay, how does that sort of fit with Core Web Vitals? Can you explain a bit, if anyone not sure what they are, what Core Web Vitals are, and how maybe this sort of works alongside that?
Definitely, yeah. So Core Web Vitals are a complementary way of measuring what is the performance from a user perception perspective of your website. So many of you are probably familiar with some of the old ways that we were measuring performance. This included how long does it take for the page to load, or how long for DOM content loaded, one of the events that happens in the process of rendering a web page. One of the reasons why we decided to move away from those towards Core Web Vitals is because those were very technical metrics that described things that were happening that were important to the web browser, but they didn't really describe what was happening in terms of the user experience. So Core Web Vitals is focused on what are the metrics that we can measure that are actually meaningful in terms of what they, what's happening for the user. And those are largest contentful paint, which is when does the biggest part of the screen actually get drawn? What is the first input delay? As in, when is the experience actually interactive for the user? And then cumulative layout shift. There's probably nothing more annoying than a page loading slowly and you're about to tap on something only to have it move away from you off the screen. This is a super frustrating experience, extremely common. So these are the three metrics that we're focused on with Core Web Vitals. And Core Web Vitals are being used as a signal by the search crawler for performance of the page. So it is a part of the ranking algorithm.
Okay, so that chimes in nicely.
I should say, Paul, Andre did a fantastic talk as well on the technical track that anybody can watch back as well, with a good 30, 40 minutes on phenomenal overview of Core Web Vitals.
Excellent. Yes, I did see that. I just thought we'd work that in here because, in my mind, the PWA plays sort of works alongside, working with your Core Web Vitals. I guess sort of while I have you front and center here, Jamie, what's your view on the sort of role of progressive web apps in making your brand and your sites more findable and more usable, more shareable?
I think it's usable and shareable. I think it's probably the two. I think it's there's a lot of tiny things that add up. So, for example, access to your contact book to be able to quickly share with people directly. If you were looking at that, the ability to access the share card built into the device to share with other apps, contacts, etc., as if a normal app would, rather than you having to go build the 1990s, share on Facebook type buttons with the 11K next to them. Those little things add up quite significantly. I think ultimately it comes back to that the speed thing. I'm already there. I've just clicked the URL. It's open. There we go. The site's done. I'm not having to re-download something that hasn't changed. I don't need to. From our side, we're able to say, has anything changed? No point sending it again. And it's a thing to say that if the site's already there and it's loading straight away, it's very easy to start building those deep relationships between brands and customers where you can build that loyalty and build that affinity because it's ready there waiting for you and it's interactive straight away. And the more that you can, going back to that psychological itch a little bit, the more that it's there and ready, the more you want to interact with it, we're finding.
Totally, yeah, it's so important. Eric, what's the Adobe sort of take on sort of discoverability and shareability and usability of PWAs?
Yeah, so very much what both Jamie and Penny had covered. I think in addition to that, I think it's really about closing that gap between native and the web, right? And so there's some really interesting work that Google is driving, the community, and really Web Standards is driving around Project Fugu. And so that example that Jamie mentioned around the contact picker is a great example of maybe even a B2B use case where you can quickly apply that to a service worker, which gives you that resilient or offline capability, where you may have a field sales rep or somebody who is in a very limited, dark, low Wi-Fi type of condition that needs access to something right away, needs access in a way that was probably only served by native. But they're in that situation, they quickly have access to their contacts that are already on their device. They have a resilient experience that didn't have to wait to, because it was web, wait to reconnect because it's already been cached to some degree, and they can accomplish their task, right? And so I think really for us, and we continue to track these, there are so many APIs and these capabilities by way of Project Fugu that continue to evolve that are being included in today's modern browsers. Again, both mobile and desktop. I think the desktop piece is really interesting as well. Despite the push for mobile and the traffic and the demand, everything is going that direction. We don't want to forget that as well. So what we're doing also benefits desktop as well, and so that's not forgotten. And again, especially in scenarios where B2B, where that may still be a little bit more common from that one. But again, summing it up, it's really about bridging the gap between those, and again, a lot of the examples that were mentioned before.
Excellent. It's interesting you bring up desktop because it does also obviously bring a lot of these benefits to that as well, which I think often gets overlooked, certainly by people like me who are obsessed with mobile. But yes, it's excellent to bring that up. In the real world, though, Jamie, what are there any sort of real examples of this sort of in use already? It's quite a sort of nascent technology. It's not as widespread as I'd like it to be.
Yeah, you're right. It kind of
examples.
It feels like it should have. For us, I think we've been doing it maybe 2-3 years now, something like that, and it feels like, why are people not there yet? From that regard, but it helps us also because it means our customers are ahead of everybody else. So it's a nice win. I think Workwear Express is a really great example for me. So we moved them over from a platform that was not Magento over to Magento 2, moved them over to a PWA. Really sweat all the details in terms of the user experience. So they have a really complicated process where you're ordering, t-shirts like this one today from Meet Magento. You're uploading custom artwork, custom things. You could have maybe 9 different logos in different places, order it in 20 different sizes and 20 different types of accessory at the same time. And that's one big user experience challenge in the first place, and from a design perspective. But when you start adding in the benefits of knowing if you lose signal, it's still going to continue. If you add the benefits of being able to do photo pickers and moving them across, it really starts to enhance that overall journey all the way across, all the way through the experience. So we're looking at, doubling the speed from a PWA perspective. Is already a pretty fast site, a nice bespoke CMS. 25% uptick in terms of revenue, 20% up in terms of conversion, 15% up in terms of AOV. And those were just the kind of first 3 months of it being live. I wouldn't want to say the pandemic number because it feels like I'm cheating, quoting hundreds of percentage across the board, but that's where they're at. Another example in our portfolio, NDA'd unfortunately, as all the best ones are, but going on to a building site, being able to write down your projects, knowing that it's offline and it's going to sync back later, but then the ability to pick out the client from your contact book, send them a quote and get that approval, all on that mobile device that you're carrying, and making that accessible to the stereotyped white van builder that doesn't really interrupt their mobile device apart from ringing and maybe doing a text message once a week. It's getting to that level of if you know mobile, you're going to intuitively know how to interact with this experience we're doing for you. And that's what we're really trying to do, is just kind of make them one and the same, rather than you having to relearn how to use the internet sometimes when it gets bespoke and when it gets complicated.
Yeah, no, I wholeheartedly agree. I think that we've seen so many people start to use the internet who maybe weren't pre-pandemic. They want this seamless experience. They want it to be as easy as Netflix. They want it to be as easy as music streaming, whatever they're doing. And I think this is going to become a vital tool in helping retailers, particularly in this instance, deliver that sort of experience. Eric, Penny, any sort of practical real-world examples that you can bring?
There's a number of Google case studies out there. So if you go look for Think with Google, you'll find a number of progressive web app case studies. They do tend to focus on the improvements to conversion rates because that tends to be what commerce is very focused on. But other things I'd like to mention is we also see very similar numbers from uninstalled PWA with the native app, typically in terms of both re-engagements, so frequency of re-engagements with the application, as well as with time spent in that app. So it's not uncommon to see time spent go up by 1.5, 2 times, and similar types of improvements for basket size, because this is an indicator that the user is more engaged. Now, one thing to be cautious of with respect to doing apples to apples comparisons between an installed experience, whether that's a native app or a PWA, and your casual browsers, is just you want to look at how qualified the traffic is, because of course your website is your front door, and there's going to be some unqualified traffic walking in the front door. So you probably want to, if you want to look at this data carefully, you want to segment out some of that unqualified traffic when you're doing the comparison. But chances are you'll see a higher level of engagement and larger basket sizes, better conversion rates from those installed users. So it can benefit you to ask the user to install at a moment that's appropriate inside of the shopping journey.
Very important and very interesting point, actually. Eric, but from the Adobe point of view.
Yeah, so I really like what Penny had to say about engagement, right? I think very much when this first came out, we were very focused on performance. Performance is, really table stakes, right? And so the other thing too is performance is highly measurable, but then we quickly moved to the customer challenges, which is that of conversion. So I think we continue to build momentum on the improvements of how P2A and how the work that we're doing continues to address that. But I think there's some really interesting trends we're also seeing from an operational standpoint as well. And so although we're continuing to collect this data, there have been some interesting cases where the resiliency and the efficiency of P2A has really helped with the hosting, the infrastructure, and other needs, because inherently what you're doing is really calling, basically calling the infrastructure, calling the back end, the servers, somewhat less than before. And so, in many ways, and maybe other metaphors where cars and others are not only better experiences, but more efficient, electric, things like that. We're doing the same thing with the web, right? Which is really exciting for that one. And so I think that efficiency is one of the more under-indexed benefits from that. And ultimately that's going to lead to lower costs, operating costs, both for the partners, but also for the end merchants, which would get passed down to as well. So we're pretty excited about that. We've had some really interesting cases where on Black Friday, the infrastructure really didn't flinch based on what was set up there, or post-pandemic when things started to reopen, the infrastructure really didn't flinch based on the PWAs built using some of the work that we've done. Really held well to the demand and really the needs of the business at those moments.
Excellent. Very interesting stuff. I was going to come to sort of where this goes next, but I'll save that as a sort of wrap-up piece for you all, because we've got some questions that have come in from the audience, which sort of sifting through them, there are some really key points here. So this is from our lovely audience. So thank you those who've sent them in. In no particular order, I'm just going to run through them in the order that they've come in. Is there an upcoming feature or tech stack that will propel how we do PWA forwards?
Eric's got that one, surely. Just next PWA studio update, and then the one after that, and the one after that, and the one after that.
At least Jamie is saying it, not me. So no, yeah, we're our message, and we've been working on this for several years. We continue to be very thoughtful, mindful on really our P2A first approach to really all of front ends and storefronts, both across Magento and Adobe. So we have a regular cadence of releases. We've got version 11 coming out that Elena Tekcheva and Dave McCauley are working on hard as part of the 2.4.3 release. But we continue to improve. We've got continue to have work to do that is based on our GraphQL APIs. Our product makes experiences that you've probably seen at Starbucks and others that were fantastic experiences, but didn't have those turnkey components, those turnkey aspects that make those types of solutions a lot more affordable and a lot more tangible for the average retailer for that. And so, we're continuing to make progress on that. B2C first, B2B next, and we continue to look at a variety of options. And again, we continue to be encouraged by the at this point well over 100 launches to date since we've started, and what they've been able to do, even things that are well out of the box. So we're also finding it easier to use and extend based on what we do out of the box, which is pretty exciting.
Excellent. I'm going to crack on as we are running out of time. This is the question that everybody wants to know the answer to. Does Apple's reluctance to support PWA limit the overall reach? Penny.
I would say no. They support all the important technologies that are required for PWAs, including the service worker. I think I would emphasize the word progressive and progressive web app. What's progressive of a progressive web app is it progressively enhances to the device that it's running on. So if the device has some capability, you want to take advantage of that where it's available. If it doesn't, then you want to be able to fail gracefully and have some backup plan in place. And if you're building a good progressive web app, it will work beautifully on an Apple device. It'll work beautifully on an Android device. It'll work beautifully on a 2-in-1, a tablet, a desktop. That's the whole idea.
Excellent. Right, we have 1 minute left. So this is a quick answer from each of you. If you could only implement one feature of a progressive web app, what would it be? Eric.
Enhanced checkout. We've got some work to do to get you even closer to the actual purchase.
Excellent. Jamie?
Offline usage, just greater speed, local cache.
Same.
Excellent. And Penny, what would be the one thing from a PWA you'd implement if you could only do one thing?
I would choose payment handling or notifications. I know that's two, but they're both important.
Excellent. Well, on that 2-for-1 bombshell, Eric, Jamie, Penny, thank you very much. That was really insightful and entertaining. We have done a ebook about PWAs, which goes into much more detail, where we've interviewed Penny, we've interviewed Jamie, we've interviewed Eric, we've talked to everybody. So do go and download that. That's got everything you need to know to get started. Then, of course, contact these guys and they will get it all working for you. And we can meet up next year and hear how successful it's been. So, team, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.